No surprise.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Great to see you. We had a good turnout on this beautiful day. We've got my great friend Kevin Brady, who you all know. So I think we're online and filming. How many people we got online? We could 1 million. It's good answer. That's what he's doing. Thank you for coming to yet another coffee with Crenshaw. We always have a special guest. I guess this is the second time we've had Kevin as our special guest to talk taxes. But you know, the thing is, it's time to talk taxes again, and there's no better person to do it than former Congressman and friend Kevin Brady. So I think this will be a fun one. Oh, I see my parents here. You're up and at it. Good. My dad just had shoulder surgery, so replace that shoulder. I'm going to have one of those eventually too. I always start out because it's called Coffee with Crenshaw with just like a little bit of whatever coffee, I don't know, knowledge or fun facts. And I'll just give you this one. Try cinnamon in your coffee. I just started that, realized it's like actually good for you. People think of cinnamon like, oh, it's just one of those sweet things that's like whatever. But no, it's actually good for you. Helps your brain work better. And in our job, you need your brains to work better. So I think we'll just get started. Actually, can I just get started on some questions about you, Kevin?
Sure. Thanks for having me.
I think I've asked you this many times. I see you in DC occasionally. I see you here a lot. And you seem light. You seem happy. How has life changed? I mean, in the since you've been in office, it's almost 2 years.
Yeah. So I loved serving in Congress. I mean, it was thank you, by the way, so for so many of you who supported me all those years, allowed me to represent you there. It was really a joy and an honor. I didn't leave for any other reason than 26 years is a pretty good run. You know what I mean? And you really God kind of tells you when it's time to try a new adventure. So I'm really I didn't leave disgruntled or discouraged. In fact, I'm really optimistic about the quality of people that I served with. And if you knew really the middle class that's in Congress, you know what I mean? You don't, they're solid people, work incredibly hard to do the right thing, sacrifice in a big way. That's really who Congress is. And so, no, I don't miss being in Congress. What you do is you miss the people you work with, including your staff and team and colleagues like Dan and the tax delegation especially, and you miss the issues you work on. But I still get to work on economic issues, taxes, trade, healthcare, and energy issues in DC, just in a different role. And I still have time to volunteer. I'm on the board of the Memorial Hermann and MD Anderson Cancer Center, both fantastic organizations. And I'm on the board of a couple think tanks, Tax Foundation and nationally at the American Action Forum. So I still get to volunteer in areas that I love as well and still stay involved. So yeah, but I'm back home here. We never moved and it's been terrific.
Yeah, you are still very involved, which is, why I think we can ask you some of the harder questions on the one, not too hard. I mean, just some of the more technical questions on taxes. I'm sure you've been following it, but let's take a step back and help everyone understand. What are we doing right now? We're doing this process called reconciliation. This process called reconciliation is a legislative vehicle. That's why we call it reconciliation. You're effectively reconciling the budget. That's what it is. And therefore, because you're reconciling a budget, it has to have budgetary effects at every provision. So you can't do immigration law, for instance. You can't change the way that we accept asylum seekers because it has no budgetary impact. You'd have to get very creative to make that. So it's got to be pretty specific. And it has to be that way because it only requires 50 votes in the Senate. So this is why this always ends up for every administration. It was this way for the Democrats. It was this way for the 2017 tax cuts. It's been this way for a long time because it's so rare that we could possibly get 60 votes in the Senate and just get things passed through regular order. And so here we are. And in 2017, the main thrust of it was taxes. We've done a lot more than just taxes on this one. But why did we feel the need to do it in 2017? And what do you think there was just your You've given this spiel 1,000 times, probably to a lot of these people, but maybe give it one more time. Like, why did we do it in 2017? Oh, and what were the benefits, you think?
Yeah, we had to do it. 2017, if you recall, last time we'd really modernized our tax code was under President Reagan, and parts of our tax code, the international area, was 50 years old, and so as a result, America had fallen so far behind all the other countries. If you recall, for a decade before tax reform, economic growth was really slow, like 1.5% a year. Paychecks had been stagnant for a decade, and you may remember at the time, about every other month, we were learning of another American company picking up and moving overseas, manufacturing, research headquarters, 16 of them from Texas, some from the Houston region. So, we had to redesign the entire tax code. So what we set out to do was create a tax code built for growth of jobs, paychecks, and the U.S. economy. We wanted to redesign it in a way that our U.S. companies could compete and win anywhere in the world, especially here at home. And when they did compete and win, to bring those profits back to invest here in the United States. And all of that was done so that America would be the premier destination for new investment, companies, of innovation, of all of this. And so that's what we set out to do. And while no tax reform is perfect, it achieved exactly what we had hoped it would do. Economic growth grew 1% faster than anyone had predicted, the fastest growing economy among all the world economies at the time. What I'm really thrilled with is paychecks grew dramatically. So the first 3 years after President Trump's tax cuts, our paychecks grew 9% faster than inflation. In other words, every month, that's the highest level of 3-year growth in history. So people were getting ahead. Yeah, every month, people were getting ahead, and poverty, as you know, 50-year low, and income inequality began to shrink. And I'm convinced, but for COVID, President Trump would have been the first president in half a century to actually shrink income inequality. Really dramatic stuff. We brought almost $3 trillion of profits investment back from overseas. Research went up. Sales and growth and jobs went up. So, we accomplished what we had hoped to do. But in 2025, the new challenge, as you said, this bill includes many of the key Trump agenda items, including border security and rebuilding the military, including extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is one big key part of this tax bill. The second is adding new provisions like the president's promises on the campaign trail on tips and overtime and issues like that, SALT, for example. And then the third area is the key savings here. This is a bill that looks to try to pay for or offset the costs of extending those tax cuts. If you recall, it's different this time as well. We did all those savings within the tax code. So we cut about $4 trillion out of the tax code, which is right because it's big and bloated, sort of like the government. So we did that there. This time it's different. You're extending the cuts. So really the savings are coming outside. That is tougher to do. And I think, Congressman, the biggest challenge here is, you have a near zero majority in the House and the Senate. The House historically tight numbers. And that means on any given day, depending on funerals, natural disasters, or kids' graduations, you have a 1-vote margin, if that. So the degree, and a lot of new members of Congress. So I think that the degree of difficulty here in 2025 is really, I don't think people appreciate just how difficult that is.
Yeah, definitely, and also kind of an impressive process. I've said to people all week that it was actually a pretty rewarding process. In the 2017 tax cuts, I wasn't in Congress yet, but it was one. I mean, it was really one committee, was it not? Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody else had instructions. It was just your committee, Ways and Means. This time, it was almost all of them. Not everyone, but all of them. And some had it easy. Okay, Armed Services, they're just instructed to spend money. Judiciary Committee, just instructed to spend money. Homeland Security Committee, instructed to spend money, right? So it's Judiciary and Homeland instructed to spend on border operations. Energy and Commerce instructed to save nearly $1 trillion. Okay, so where are you going to get that $1 trillion? Well, that's why we looked at energy and commerce, because we oversee some of the bigger spending programs, namely Medicaid. Medicare was effectively taken off the table by the president. Thought it was too politically unviable. Doesn't mean we couldn't make changes that actually would at least reform the program for the better in the future. But we really focused on Medicaid. And then my personal focus was on making sure that the changes saved a lot of money, but also didn't affect Texas, because Texas is one of those non-expansion states that has been doing it responsibly for all this time. There's only 10 states doing this at this point. Everybody else took the bait. And, so that was a big argument in energy commerce, and at least we won in the House. It's hard to say what the Senate does, and we'll get to questions about how the Senate does all of this soon. You said something, and then I had a follow-up question, but I forgot what it was. So I'll go to so I think, let me just, sorry, I'm just going to, we're in real time here. If it's highlighted, that's my question. Are these from the audience, the non-highlighted ones? Yes? Okay, I just want to make sure. So let's make sure we get those asked then. This question is pretty simple. It's from the audience. How do you think the Senate will change it? I'm going to paraphrase the question.
So short answer is, the House, by the way, beat all expectations. No one with that zero majority, they really believed this would go to the end of the year. It'd be a train wreck. There's no way Republicans were going to.
I was amazed how it went.
It was. I'm just telling you.
It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. It was going line item by line item by line item by line item in those secret. Yeah,
and he started last year with all these conferences preparing. So the House prepared, the committees prepared, and in that work really proved out, being able to move that bill so quickly. Now it's in the Senate's hands. They're going to start, timeline is they hope to start voting on parts of it mid next week. I think their hope and drive is to get this done by July 4th for the president, but it's going to be difficult to do because some of the changes they're making, they have very tight majorities. They have a different budget process in the Senate than in the House, super complicated. Slow. And so, I still think they can hit that July 4th date, but I will tell you, if they don't, so what? If they're off a week, they're off 2, so what? You've beat expectations at the end of the year by a big margin. People will be able to have certainty in the tax code and in these spending provisions as well. So I think at the end of the day, if you look at the 3 parts of that bill, extending the tax cuts and making them permanent, great. Adding the president's new provisions, plus some new improvements on education savings accounts and issues like that, great. And then the savings side of that, Senate's still going to have to stick kind of within the framework that the House put together. As you know, they have differences on how do you save the money, like in Medicaid. How do you spend the money, like in the Inflation Reduction Act and renewables, issues like that. And then SALT is still a big one. And then they've made some good, big changes in the international space, I think are build upon what we did in 2017 in a good way as well. So yeah, they're trying to put their mark on it. Right now they're over. The original version is over the budget they're shooting for. So they've still got a lot of work to do in the Senate.
So right now what you're seeing is they're saving less than what our bill did.
Or spending more.
Yeah, when we expected that to happen, those senators.
I didn't say that.
Well, and it's hard to know. I mean, I've seen some. I'm paying attention to what's in my jurisdiction on Medicaid. Some of the things I like, the rumors I'm hearing, I'm like, okay, I can live with that. It doesn't affect, as long as it doesn't affect the way Texas pays for Medicaid. Then there's other things that I'm not so sure about. And we've been trying to help the Senate understand. Look, we created a Jenga puzzle, and it went all the way to the ceiling. And there's not that many more moves you can make before it all just falls apart. Because we're the ones with 218 votes and a lot more personality, let's say, in the House than there is in the Senate. Although that's kind of changed over time.
I think at the end of the day, the one thing I'm really confident is they're going to get it done. And they're going to get it done on time, way ahead of schedule. And I think every step, I'd like to tell you every step in this process is easier, but in truth, every step is harder. At the end of the day, I think they will make some improvements and they're doing a lot of talking with the House tax writers,
Yeah.
for example, so there's a lot more collaboration going on than I think is readily apparent.
That isn't in there, but you guys found a lot of savings in 2017 to offset. Again, it was all in ways and means. It was give tax cuts here, but you get to take away from here. They did a little bit of that in this new bill, but not nearly as much. Because I mean, one of the big, for instance, one of the big things you guys did was the SALT deductions, and of course, but we had bigger majorities, so you could afford to have the New Yorkers vote against it. I mean, you'd be surprised the people you see now who support the president. Well, they voted against his major bill, and it was for things like SALT. So because we're now changing that, just because I wasn't involved as much in Ways and Means, I'm not sure if and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but what savings did they find, if any, at least in Ways and Means? Like, so how might people's taxes actually go up in certain ways, depending on what business they're in, or where they might find those, or did they even try? And was that just all put on me in Medicaid? Finding savings in Medicaid.
Yeah, so they extended some of the savings we put in the tax code from last time, so they extended that. That was good work. They proposed to limit the SALT deduction for certain small businesses, pass-through organizations, not non-corporations. They found about $60 billion of savings there. Obviously, the Inflation Reduction Act, that was the big bulk of the savings that came from Ways and Means. Again, big input from Energy and Commerce, obviously, in all that as well. So, they found some savings within the tax code, but again, a different mission this time.
Yeah,
extending versus completely redesigning.
Right, we wanted to make it permanent so that people just know what their taxes are going to be for the long term.
And they did a really good thing too, Congressman, in that they fully restored the ability for businesses to write off immediately their research, development, their expensing when they buy new equipment and new technology. Maybe besides lowering the corporate, the most pro-growth part of the tax code is the ability to write off the cost of those vehicles, that equipment, the technology. So they fully restored that. And then they did a third one dealing with interest deductibility. But those three provisions, which Ways and Means really led with that doubles. Those provisions really drive most of the growth in this new bill. So that was really good work.
That's the way to summarize it. What we're trying to do is give you certainty, you being the American people and the American economy and American businesses, certainty over your tax code. You're not going to start investing. You're not going to build that new plant. You're not going to open up that new warehouse. You're not going to invest if you just don't know what your taxes are going to be over the next couple of years. It's just not going to happen. Hence the rush to do this.
And I would say one thing.
Yeah.
I think
I finally remembered my other question, so I'm going to keep it right. Go ahead.
So extending those middle class tax cuts, I think, was great. Extending, and they even increased the tax cut for small businesses. Remember, we created the 20% deduction, first time ever for Main Street businesses. They extended that, made it permanent, and even made it a little bigger, which is excellent as well. And one of the favorite things for us in Texas, obviously, is they took the estate tax, death tax exemption to 15 million and indexed it for inflation, which means, so many family-owned businesses and farms don't have to worry about Uncle Sam swooping in and taking 40% of everything you spend a lifetime earning. They no longer have to worry about that. So a lot of really good provisions, and avoided about a $3,000 a family tax hike if they hadn't acted. So good work.
Yeah. And I doubt most Americans even realize that if we do nothing, your taxes go up in December just by law automatically. The only other thing I wanted to point out, you were talking about wage growth, and I always point out to critics mostly on the Democrat side, that wage growth was actually double the rate for the bottom quintile of earners. Yep. So the people who had the highest wage growth rates were the poorest. That's hence the constriction of inequality that we were starting to see until COVID screwed it all up. I guess the question I want to ask you is one of the biggest critiques really from our own side. I mean, the Democrats jump on this as well, but it's, for the people who were critical of it from our own side, they're saying, look, this just adds to the debt. It's nothing but a spending spree. And there's a couple of counter arguments. One, this is not the cause of the debt. There are underlying structural problems in entitlement programs that are the actual cause of the debt. This at least attempts to take on some of that. And again, we took all the arrows. We were the ones who were spat on. We were the ones who told we were murdering little children and disabled people all day long in our committee on energy and commerce, because we're the ones who had to deal with Medicaid. Now, none of it was true. I remember making that point publicly because what the Democrats did is they flew in all of these poor people in wheelchairs, poor kids, and saying, this is who you're taking Medicaid away from. And we could easily say, because of the policy, that's just not true. I mean, we're making all these savings. We're getting all these savings actually from just freezing the growth of certain provisions of Medicaid. It was the lightest possible touch you could take. If you're really serious about Medicaid reform and saving money, you'd have to normalize FMAPs for expansion states. Now we're getting a little wonky, but it basically means for states who expanded under Obamacare, they get a 90% match from the federal government. That's basically a bribe for them to get to expand Obamacare so that Obamacare could say that they had more people on their covered, even though they really weren't. They were just added to Medicaid. I digress. What I really want to ask you is CBO scores. So the other counter argument we have, besides the kind of philosophical one that I sort of got into just now, but would take a little bit longer to flesh out. The other argument, and Jody Arrington made this is constantly argument a lot. He's the budget committee, fellow tax and budget committee chairman, has a big part in reconciliation. Like, look, yes, I get what you're saying about CBO scores and how much it quote unquote costs us. And again, I'm not sure it's proper terminology to say that letting you keep more of your money is costing the government. It does have an effect on deficits and debt, but a cost I'm not sure that's true. Anyway, but the CBO also scores a certain way. And so how much were they wrong about what y'all did in 2017? There was projections and then there was reality.
Yeah, so Congressional Budget Office is the nonpartisan scorekeeper on all this, and they're aided by the Joint Committee on Taxation, which really digs in the tax side of it. So bottom line is they were way off. We had paid for the tax cuts, 70% of it in the bill itself, but we knew there'd be economic growth. In fact, we had record years of revenue coming in the government. Great example, businesses, let's just say corporations. We lowered their tax rate from 35 to 21 and generated more revenue for the government. So lower taxes, more investment in their workers, in their companies, in their communities, growth in a big way. So I think overall, there was about $1.5 trillion higher revenue above projections, not just total higher revenues, higher than projected from TCJA. And so they were off by a big amount.
Quite a bit.
I think so I think they'll be off again. The way CBO looks at tax cuts, they don't see it very pro-growth. But the other thing they struggle getting right is healthcare, because it's so complex. They are like their estimates of who might lose coverage was way off back then in 2017. I still think they've got 5 million Americans who, if they're required to work, volunteer, go to school 20 hours a week, they estimate 5 million people will choose not to do that and to lose their Medicaid coverage. What we learned was if you require people to work 20 hours, they tend to just work full time. Bottom line is, once you get them back in the workforce, starting earning that stuff, they start re-engaging. We saw that before. I think we'll see that again. So yeah, I question the CBO estimates on the healthcare side.
Yeah, and on Medicaid in particular, they estimate about 12 million total losses, and that's a scary number. But then you actually point out, okay, a couple million of those are just simply saying illegal immigrants can't be on it. Another couple million of those are, hey, these people are enrolled in 2 states. We're just cleaning up.
Yeah, that's 1.5 million people, I think.
Yeah, it's about that.
Yeah,
and then another portion are people who just refuse to work, even with all the exemptions they have. So you have to be an able-bodied, healthy adult with no dependents, no other issues, no mental health disorders, no abuse disorder. Like there's so many exemptions. So you literally have to be the laziest person in the world. It just doesn't want to work. And you're like, okay, fine, you can only get Medicaid. So that's true. We are cutting those. But all they have to do is sign up for some form of work or be looking for work or charity, and they can have it. It's the lightest touch. That's a good segue into the next question from the audience. Said many in Congress and the White House described the regulatory reforms in the big beautiful bill as restoring common sense, personal responsibility, and fiscal sanity. In what ways do your contributions reflect those principles? Okay, well, thank you for letting me talk about that. Who put that question there? Thank you. Yeah, so we talked about the tax part a lot, but the 2017 bill was just taxes. Now, I think it reflected a pro-growth conservative mentality, but we went a lot further in this thing. It's not just work requirements on Medicaid, there's work requirements on SNAP as well. So the Ag Committee had a huge part in this, and the savings as well. They also had to deal with a lot of angry people. Work requirements, I'm proud of that one because, I mean, that was a bill that I introduced, was Senator Cassidy? Back in January. So, you know, putting that in there, and that doesn't apply to Texas. Like Texas is not going to have to figure out how to do work requirements because it only applies to the expansion population. Keep in mind, Medicaid is meant for the poorest, the sickest, the children, women. That's what it's meant for. It's grown well beyond that over time. That saved about $300 billion, but it does more than that. And you mentioned this, it usually people will just work. And it's restoring the dignity of work is a pretty important thing. And usually when they're working, by the way, well, they probably do have a healthcare plan associated with that work. Another thing we did here is just, again, it's about cleaning up the enrollees. If you have a job, a lot of people actually, this is a big problem in Medicaid. And this kind of gets into the waste, fraud, and abuse portion, but it's more like a mistake. The people are enrolled in Medicaid. Maybe they needed it. Maybe they were totally eligible for it. But then they finally get a job, and now they got health care. But they don't think to call Medicaid and be like, hey, guys, don't need it anymore. We're good, right? They just think, hey, I'm not using it anymore, so it's fine. And you might think, well, they're not using it anymore, so it's not a cost to the government. But you would be wrong. Because Medicaid, and this is true basically in every state, certainly in ours, Medicaid outsources that to some kind of health management service, like an HMO. So they are paying you, the taxpayer, still are paying for that person who they're not bad, they're not fraudulent. It's a mistake that gets made and overlooked, and it's up to the state Medicaid program to actually clean out those enrollees more often. So that's one thing we look at. There's obviously the growth provisions in taxes, like you had just mentioned, bonus depreciation, R&D expensing, of course. There's my amendment, which has always been controversial, actually until now, which is funny. My amendment, which reduces the deficit by over $2.5 billion. So you get $2.5 billion in savings over 10 years. That amendment is the new Hyde Amendment. So we're trying to call it the Crenshaw Amendment. You can use that if you want. I'm not saying you have to, but it is. This is basically does the following. It cuts federal funding for transgender affirmation therapies. That's what it does. I've been fighting this battle for a long time, focused on the kids, focused on minors under 18, because I think that's the true insanity that we need to solve. Texas has already made that illegal, but we have to make sure federal funding doesn't go to that. And this is just a first step. My original bill would really take a larger cut to that practice by removing federal GME funding from children's hospitals that do it. We just can't get that through reconciliation rules. So this removes Medicaid, CHIP, ACA funding. So it's still a pretty big deal. We also got in there my bill from 2021. We've been working on this for a while, which pays Texas back for border operations to the tune of about $11 billion.
How much?
We're saying about 11 billion. It's about 11. It's like 12 billion, but it's technically for all states. But the way it's written, it kind of only applies to Texas because nobody else really spent that much money. And that's how we wrote. That's how I wrote it originally. I can't take. I mean, and in the delegation, I think worked together really well getting this in there. I got to give credit to Chip Roy on this and Michael McCall, who had figured out how to get it into the rules managers amendments at the very end, because if you do things that's pretty good for just one state, especially Texans, you can speak to this. the rest of the conference starts to get very grumpy. And so that worked out really well. And Cornyn is making sure and spearheading the effort to make sure it stays in the Senate bill. So I think we were pretty proud about a couple of those things. Let's see, we just talked about that, the reimbursement. So I'm going to skip to that. Okay. Robert from Kingwood wants feedback on the following: Social Security and Medicare taxes for 2025. The rate of Social Security tax on taxable wages is 6.2%. This is for you. Okay, this is complex.
Now I'm going to listen.
The rate of Social Security tax on taxable wages is 6.2%, each for the employer and employee. The Social Security wage base limit is $176,000. Medicare tax rate is 1.45%, each for the employee and employer, unchanged from 2024. There's no wage base limit for Medicare tax. I'd like to suggest the following amendment to eliminate the Social Security wage base limit to unlimited from the current level of $176,000 that is currently in effect and make it permanent. What are your thoughts?
So I wouldn't do that. Honestly, payroll taxes, I think, are some of the most economically damaging taxes we have, because, as you know, if you want less of something, tax it. So when you raise taxes, you actually punish work, productivity, earnings. I mean, the things you want more of. And so I'm not a fan of payroll taxes. In this case, I think what this questioner is really asking is, how do we make Social Security solvent? You just saw the news from yesterday where in 2033, so 8 short years, Social Security is technically insolvent. More importantly, benefits will be cut automatically by about 23%. That'll be devastating. It's unbelievable how many folks, like, Social Security is it is an anti-poverty program. It's not a retirement system. And a lot of Americans, on average, about $1,400 a month, pretty tough to live there. And so a cut of that size would be devastating. We've only got 8 years to find that solution. I think this person is saying just raise taxes on those folks and that'll solve it. There's no question. If you did that, it would cover probably half of the deficit needed. But the truth is that's not the answer. At the end of the day, two things.
It'd be a massive tax increase for people who actually paid 99% of the taxes already.
There's no
and yeah, they're rich, but you have to have an ethical conversation at that point, and I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, and the bottom line is no single party can preserve Social Security once and for all. It's going to take both parties to do it. There's no way around that. If either party tries it, it won't stick. And you'll be back at it all the time. You're going to have to find, just like under President Reagan, you're going to have to find that solution. Secondly, they're going to have to decide, do they keep trying to fix the system we have, or do they find a way to actually give people more control of their Social Security earnings over in retirement so that it grows faster? Right now in Social Security, as you know, these aren't your accounts. I mean, by law, these are virtual accounts. You're not paying into yours. It's to your parents and grandparents. It earns almost no money. You might as well put your money into a coffee can. Do they still have coffee cans anywhere? Throw it in the ground, because it's just not growing at all. So, one of the questions will be, is there a smarter way with those contributions to make that grow, have more control over it, and have better peace of mind when you retire? But that question kind of tackles the solvency issue. The sooner Congress gets after it, the better. Presidential leadership, I think, is going to be needed too. What do you think?
Yeah. Medicare and Social Security are, it's a math equation, and it's benefits and taxes. That's how you make it solvent. And so you got to look at, and you said the parties have to get together, and you're referring to Democrat and Republican, but I would also suggest that the real divide should be, it's really not in our politics, but it really should be, the parties we're talking about should be generations, because my generation's screwed, totally screwed. And so that's where the actual debate has to be. I mean, because when we look at proposals like this, you're really talking about taxing younger generations, while those younger generations are are objectively living in a world with higher prices than their parents had in certain areas, things like housing, education, healthcare, that have exceeded prices well beyond the rate of inflation. So that's true for millennials. I mean, millennials are not totally wrong when they complain about these things. And then you want to tax them the most because they're the ones who are going to be paying the large part of this, while they're trying to build their families, build their businesses. Is that really fair? And no, I don't think it is. But it's also maybe not fair that I would retire at whatever the age is, 67. Maybe that's not fair. Maybe that's what I need to give as a 41-year-old who, and because we are living longer. I mean, that's just the trend, of course, that's happened. And it's also, by the way, that's why we have a problem with this stuff. And everybody wants to believe that the problem is some kind of government spending or malfeasance. The reality of these programs is that demographics is the problem. We simply just have more seniors than we used to, and they're living longer. It's really as simple as that. So that's nobody's fault except our healthcare system for keeping people alive longer, I guess, is a good thing. But you've got to make the changes accordingly, and not a lot of people want to believe that. Every time I say that, people get mad. But it's true. And so that has to be the debate. It does have to be bipartisan. If we're ever going to fix it, it's got to be bipartisan. And the American people have to not be lied to. That's the other thing that has to happen. It's going to take leadership from at the top, from a leader that doesn't care about reelection. And it says, look, this is just something we have to fix for the good of our country. The last time we did even anything close to it was under Reagan, where he raised the retirement age very slowly over the course of like 30 years. And that was all they did. I mean, and that helped. If President Bush had had his way, Bush had his way with their Social Security plan, we'd be crushing it right now. We'd be great because they proposed personal savings accounts for Social Security. That math, you could propose the same thing right now. It wouldn't work because the math has gone too far in the wrong direction. But back then it would have worked. But he was, slandered for it. He was told he was throwing granite off a cliff. So, my goal is to always make sure that people actually understand the truth about these problems, even if they don't like to hear that truth. And I think I'll leave it there. There was maybe one other thing I wanted to say about that, but I think you get the point. All right, let's move on. More time on an amendment, specifically. Sorry, we already did this one, the gender transition one. Yes, we're very proud of that. We'll keep going. The cartel task force. I love answering cartel questions. Thank you for asking. What is the cartel task force now? As a different, I'm going to paraphrase this question. What's different now about it than before? So I've been leading this effort to battle the cartels for a while. I would call it's both task forces have been official in nature. First one was designated by McCarthy, but like any task force in Congress or caucus in Congress, and you can speak to this, it's just a group of members trying to get some jobs done. That's it. I mean, we're not really funded. We didn't have any extra staff. We still did a lot, traveled all over the country. I mean, it's maybe some budget to travel, but that's about it. And frankly, actually, most of that travel was done through my other committee, the Intelligence Committee, which is a much more fun place to be. But we had 30 plus, I would call them informal hearings, like solid question and answer sessions with administration officials, current, former, outside experts. We learned a lot. Been to Mexico about three times since in the last couple of years, and plan to take the new task force there again. I asked the new Speaker Johnson about having a select committee, because one of my big findings when it comes to cartels is this is a highly cross-jurisdictional issue. It touches DOD, CIA, FBI, DEA, Department of State, just everyone. And so how do you manage it? You can't put this problem set into any specific committee. And he said, yes, you can put it in Intel. I said, okay. Now, if you're going to put it somewhere, that does make the most sense, because technically all of those agencies I just mentioned have an Intel component, and we have an element of jurisdiction over them. And most of the work that needs to be done when it comes to cartels is classified. An Intelligence Committee is the only committee that truly gets the classified information. HASC does as well, and also the Appropriations Committee that oversees armed services. They get some, but very specific stuff, and it's actually really just their leadership. We actually get everything. So I'm the only person who is able to go to every single agency and truly see what's going on this problem set. And like, I have good news to report over the last couple of years, even before Trump took office. There's plenty going on, but not so much in the Department of Defense. One of the bigger changes and more reason for optimism at the moment is because two things. President Trump was elected. And it's not like Biden didn't care about this, but he didn't, and he did approve some pretty cool stuff. But it was never his focus. You know, he never said, hey, you guys got to do this better and more. Like Trump came into office and said, executive order, you're going to do this. And now that awoke the DOD finally listened because of Trump's leadership. So that's one big thing that changed. So NORTHCOM is the combatant command in charge of Mexico and North America. They didn't really care about that. I mean, not that they didn't care. They had nothing to do. Now, again, in their defense, the reason was the previous Mexican administration would not play. And that's been the case for a long time. And that's always been a problem for us. So the second seismic shift besides President Trump was the administration change in Mexico, much better partner. They are very aggressively targeting elements of right now, the Sinaloa cartel. They're kind of picking them off as like and
it seems like they want to do more.
They want to do more. I've met with them, with their head of security, which you would maybe think of as sort of a mix of their joint chiefs and national security advisor. And yeah, they're very aggressive. We've really got the best partners we could possibly ask for. And it's so what we're trying to create on the task force is something I would call the North America Security Initiative, which just backs that up with the kind of weaponry and training that they need.
What's the most important thing we can do to help them tackle those cartels?
Well, first we have to identify the problem. So and the way I describe this is it's a counterinsurgency war. So you have to identify it correctly. You're fighting in a terrorist insurgency. And it's an insurgency because an insurgency by definition is integrated into all levels of society. From, you know, they're militias, they're paramilitaries, but they're also in government. They're literally in pop culture. And so you have to, that's a long-term battle. We've done it before. Actually, very successfully. Actually, we do have counterinsurgency doctrine. There is a strategy to do that, but it involves all parts of government. You know, give you an example. Because this is a difficult one because people try to prosecute their way out of it. So DEA, FBI, they want to prosecute targets. They want extraditions. You're never going to prosecute your way out of a counterinsurgency war. You do need some military aspect of that. But again, it's a modern country, Mexico, and they don't just use their military on their own soil, not without a judiciary component. They still need a warrant from a judge. It's very much similar in Colombia. So it's complicated. You need DOJ lawyers, and we have a program for this already, that's down inside Mexico training Mexican prosecutors to bring cases to fruition. You know what somebody guess what the prosecution rate federally for the United States is and what it is in Mexico? You don't have to guess. It's like 90 plus in the upper 90s in the United States, and then it's 1.5% in Mexico. So there's a lot of reasons for that. Their laws just don't make sense for prosecuting. That's for one thing, and they've done a great job changing that over the last 6 months. The new president has. They also just got rid of all their judges and then had, for the first time, elections for judges, just like we do. And I don't know what the outcome of that's going to be just yet. It's a little, but I'm cautiously optimistic because the goal there is for, and everyone's like, well, that's just the president's, basically choosing their judges. Yeah, it is. It is. But this particular president also wants to go after the cartels. So
it had to help when President Trump shut down the border. It had to turn off a bunch of revenue. Didn't you? You had some big numbers for what cartels were making with that open border approach. It was the billions.
Yeah, it's about 12 billion a year, probably. So because what they'll do is they charge, depending on your country of origin, you get charged a certain amount of money for crossing the border, and then you get charged more as you go because you got to deal with different cartels and different human trafficking networks. But it's expensive. For a typical Mexican, might be $300. For someone from China, $30,000. So at least 12 billion. So yeah, you've taken that off of their income. So closing the border is a huge part of it. It's just the first step, though. Designating them as a terrorist organization, good first step because what it did really was, like I mentioned before, it woke up the DOD. They were not really playing in this, and now they are. I'll be going to Colorado after next week to meet with Northcom, and I've already met with them in Mexico City, but we're going to meet again, get a better idea of like what their planning is. And I'm my job, because no one else is doing it, and it really isn't my job in Congress, but my job has become like, well, since I know what everyone's doing, let's put together the grand strategy of the counterinsurgency doctrine that we need to be fighting. And then our job in Congress is to actually get it funded.
Can I tell you too? I'm really thrilled with the president's focus on fentanyl, because I'll bet if we asked to show of hands, who knows someone who has lost a child, a loved one, been impacted by fentanyl, I bet every hand in this room would go up. I think the focus on that, and certainly with Mexico, with Sheinbaum and her new approach, we've really seen some big gains in that area. Nowhere near where we want to be as a country, but really appreciate the focus on fentanyl and all of that coming across the border.
And on the fentanyl, and this is also how I couch it when we write about it. We've written reports on this, and we sent them around the administration. And I gotta say, like, every department's doing really well. You know, FBI, Kash Patel, and we actually have mutual friends to the SEAL teams who've known him for a while. They're doing some really great work, and not the FBI wasn't before, but Kash is really good about telling you about the work they're doing. It's really good. DHS is doing great. DOD is doing great. Everybody's CIA is tip of the spear. Everybody's doing really good work you should be proud of. Our job is to bring it all together into a single strategy. And that strategy is two things. It's the short-term mission, which is fentanyl. Short-term mission is to deter the cartels from producing fentanyl. That's possible because in the end, they're business people. They're psychotic business people with basically kind of an occult death worship culture. I mean that in full seriousness. We can get into some gruesome details if you'd like to know, but we've done it on plenty of podcasts. There is an occult worship in the cartel culture. It's just how they do things. But money is still their primary driving factor, and if they feel too much pressure because of fentanyl, they will make money other ways. And they have plenty of other ways of making money. So that's short-term mission. Long-term mission, you have to rid Mexico, our biggest trading partner and neighbor, of the narco insurgency that is controlling it. That is a national security risk through and through. And that's it. But that's a 20 to 30 year plan. You've got to be honest about what it takes to beat an insurgency. That's how long it's taken to get Colombia back to where it is. And by the way, because the new president in Colombia is so bad, how quickly it can devolve. It hasn't totally devolved, but it can. Counterinsurgency has to be a commitment. All right, switching gears. Kevin, this is a question from someone in the audience. You used to represent the Woodlands and, of course, the major oil and gas companies there. Anything to add, or maybe, I don't know, take it any direction you want.
So I think it is a huge economic relief for American energy, especially in Texas, to not be attacked by their own government every day, which is what it felt like for a number of years, where you're shutting down the pipeline, shutting off the permit, shutting off access to lands, onshore, offshore. It was just brutal. And so they can't make the long-term investments they need to make sure we're a growing country. Power, we need more power. In Texas is a great example. Our regulatory ERCOT, I guess it's called, estimates, they told the legislature this year that our electricity needs in our state need to double in the next 5 years. Think about it. It took us 190 years to get to this need for power, double all that in the next 5 years. It is crucial in every level of energy that we be able to unleash that, move these projects forward. And so I really think what the Trump White House has been doing is terrific, not just short term, but long term for these investments. I think too, adopting a different approach on greenhouse gases. I mean, the old approach was drive up the price of energy, kill as many energy jobs off as soon as you can. I mean, that was the whole strategy. The strategy now is all the above, keep good paying energy jobs. And by the way, focus on new technology and innovation that allow us to produce more energy affordably, but with technology that doesn't drive up the price. So you add jobs, you add affordable energy, and then take that technology and send it around the world, tax free and tariff free, so the rest of the world can do the same thing. You know what I mean? So rather than punish American and Texas energy workers now, there's a different approach on those types of environmental issues and more common sense in the regulatory space. That's your bailiwick. Having you on energy and commerce, I think, is key both for our district, for our region, because one, you're right in the middle of all things energy, and two, you're in the middle of all things healthcare. If you had to look at the Houston region, you look at our district, right? This district right here, energy and healthcare drives so many jobs, so many of our neighbors' jobs and community jobs. So having you in that role, I think, is just key.
And a couple of things to add just on what we passed out of reconciliation. Again, hard to say what the Senate does with some of this, but I think one of the more creative provisions we had, it's hard to do energy policy with reconciliation because it has to have a budgetary effect. So one of the ways we figured out how to promote LNG exports, for instance, is by creating a user fee for permitting. This is something that's normally done in the healthcare space, for instance, and when applying for an FDA a permit. But so why not apply it to the energy sector as well? So you're making them pay, but they want to pay because then then they have certainty over when that facility might be permitted. So I hope that that continues to make it through the Senate. One of the things they did in Ways and this is not in our committee, but in Ways and Means, because it's taxes, although it's obviously touches energy, was repealing a lot of the tax credits for green energy. Now they repealed them all. Yeah, I mean it's long overdue. I mean, you know, the solar and wind have had these tax credits for forever, and the time has come. They repealed all of them, even for carbon capture and nuclear. So I think the Senate's probably going to change that and not repeal them for nuclear. And I would support that because what we need, because of the reasons you stated, and the need for extra energy demand, but reliable and non-intermittent energy. And if you want it to be clean, nuclear is going to be the answer. And you've got to start building it and scaling it so that it becomes cheaper. There's more we can do there. We had some success on energy and commerce doing NRC reform, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission reform, making it easier to permit. We still can go further. We can still go further with EPA permitting, and we've actually established some pretty. We worked with Cruz on this. We had a good bill last year. Biden signed. That we got NEPA reform. NEPA is National Environmental Protection Act. So that's EPA permitting. That's what that means. Okay. And it's hard to get EPA permitting for a lot of things you want to build. And so where that reform has always been top of our list as Republicans. And we actually got it through, but for one specific industry, semiconductor chip manufacturers. But that did lay out an interesting path forward. Maybe what it laid out was, okay, if Democrats like a thing like chip manufacturing, they'll agree to NEPA reform. And nuclear is a thing that most of them like. It wasn't true before, but they've come around to sanity and basic math and physics. And so, nuclear is no longer the boogeyman that it used to be, and it shouldn't be. So there's some good things in there. I'll also give a shout out to Lee Zeldin, EPA administrator. There were so many damaging things that were done, especially to our district. When you think of the petrochemical industry, the oil and gas industry, the plastics industry, a lot of that is right here in the Houston area and certainly in our district. There's probably about over 30 regulations they put in place that were extremely damaging, and Lee Zeldin has all of them on the chopping block. We don't even have to write him letters about it. So I think that's been really great. Question from Michael from Kingwood asking, you've been outspoken about the national. I guess we both have probably been outspoken, but I don't know, maybe me more. You've been outspoken about the national security risks of Chinese-owned technology, specifically TikTok. What do you see as the right path for U.S. tech policy to protect American data privacy without stifling innovation? Would you favor further regulation on social media or foreign tech? How do you balance security concerns with free speech, economic interests? Good question. I don't know if you want to take a stab at it or you want me to go first. You probably
this is your area of expertise.
Let
me know if you want to talk taxes. You can jump in on that.
Yeah, maybe tax TikTok out of here.
This is this guy.
Look, the main problem with TikTok is, there's data privacy, but of course I can tell you, hey, they're taking your data. And you know what the teenager response to me is? I don't care. What data do I have? I don't take my data. TikTok's awesome. That's the response. So that's not an argument that lands well with Americans. The reality is this. Yes, they're taking your data. That actually is important because what do they do with that data? They learn about you. More importantly, they learn about us in the aggregate. They learn how to manipulate you. They already are. That's why you sit there and you scroll forever and ever and ever, because the videos are just so entertaining, because it knows exactly what you want. So you have to imagine a scenario where they can control that in time of war and make you think whatever they want. And there's already plenty of evidence of this. Maybe not in our country exactly, happens in other countries though. And I have to be careful about moving over to a classified discussion. So I kind of have to leave it there. And you might say, well, why would they, can the Chinese really do that? The company's based in Singapore, not China. Yeah, but that's not how it actually works. The company is based in Singapore, but it has a parent company, as so many corporations do. And that parent company is a company called ByteDance. ByteDance is absolutely in China. And it's not just a state-owned enterprise. I mean, it is such a state-owned enterprise that the Chinese Communist Party has people on its board. And here's the other thing. There's a 2017 national security law in China that says everyone in China has to be a spy if we tell you to. That's it. That's basically the gist of the law. If you are told by our government to engage in intelligence collection, you will do it. You will hand over data. You will do all of that. And then, of course, we know it's happened as well. So that's the problem. And I hate that it's a problem. I think our bill was the right approach. It was, look, we can keep TikTok existing. It just needs to be American owned. And of course, that's been hard to do. And I like that President Trump has tried to delay it, try to make a sale happen. I think that's the right approach, because this isn't urgent. But it is and it isn't. We need to get it done. But the Chinese aren't they're not playing. It would be a good investment. It's a good platform. I'll be on TikTok once it's America owned. So, and as far as does it stifle free speech? No, I really don't think so. I mean, we cannot interpret free speech as letting foreign countries do whatever they want in our country. That is not how any of us have ever thought about free speech. This is a specific company owned by a foreign adversary that has the ability to do things to us. In no way, shape, or form does I think that infringe on free speech. And I think that's the courts came to the same conclusion there. When it just comes to cybersecurity standards in general, I mean, this is a big problem. If you have the best cybersecurity defenses in whatever company you own or whatever critical infrastructure we are running, that'll probably block 99% of the attacks. But if somebody really wants in, they'll get in. And look, we are looking for it constantly, but we can never have enough software, computer engineers working this problem and learning to counter hack. This gets to maybe an education deficit in our country, or the need to at least bring some of those experts in from because there's a ton of expertise in Europe and actually where all our adversaries are. You need those people to defect to us to actually work on our side. It's a hard problem to solve, and we don't have a lot of time to go into it in depth. I want to make sure we get to at least one more question, because I'm being told we got 2 minutes. I think we can both answer this one, unless you have anything to add to TikTok.
No, sir.
Okay, like just stay out of that one. This is from Brian from Valley Ranch. He said, the current political climate's highly polarized, but we've been able to work across the aisle. How do you approach bipartisanship on Capitol Hill? Are there specific issues you believe Republicans and Democrats can collaborate on despite polarization? More broadly, what steps do you think Congress can do to rebuild trust and civility so that important legislation isn't stalled in partisan gridlock? We've done a lot of this. Do you want to start?
So I'll be really brief. Look, what the culture that I try to create on Ways and Means Committee among our Republicans, all conservatives, was look, wake up every day, working as hard as you can to stop bad ideas, because there are a lot of those in Washington, D.C. And you have advanced your own good ideas, but wake up each day, work equally hard to find common ground if you can. Because there's issues, whether it's security, veterans, good pro-growth tax policy. There's areas where it always mystifies me that there's partisanship in those areas. And I think it's good because some take a really extreme view on these issues. And the truth of the matter is, when you can find a Democrat willing to work on those cartels, you know what I mean, or on cybersecurity issues or intelligence issues, and you can strengthen America by doing it. I just think, if you work equally hard to do both, stop bad ideas, advance good ones, and then where you can find common ground that strengthens America. It always seemed to me like I was doing my job. That's what I would tell our members. If you're doing both those all out, as a conservative, for your community, for the country, you're going to make it, but you're doing your job. So that was just my thought on those areas. That's why we reformed the IRS in a bipartisan way. We did big retirement security issues in a bipartisan way. I asked John Lewis, civil rights icon, and Lynn Jenkins, an accountant from Wichita Falls, to redesign the IRS, which they did. COVID hit, never happened. But the point being, it's hard work. And sometimes as conservatives, you get accused of working with the other party. But on some of these issues, we should be Americans on it. And the truth of the matter is, for conservatives, yeah, I never felt like I was giving up. It was finding common ground, disagreeing where you disagree. But I never had to give up any principles in working on those bills. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that I would just add that, a lot of people ask about the certain caucuses that make this their entire, mission, right? Is bipartisan legislating, the Tuesday group or no labels or whatever it is. And I've never joined them. And the reason for that is because I figured out a while ago that when you need bipartisanship, you've got to find the right Democrat. It depends on the issue and it depends on what committee they're on. So you got to find the right person on the right committee and then just talk to them. It's just that simple. And we've been able to do it in a number of ways. I mean, personally, the cartel task force has always been very, very bipartisan. I probably had might say I actually had more Democrat involvement in that than the 19 Republicans that said they wanted to be a part of it. Apart from a few, I'll give Brian Babin. Obviously, Brian Babin. He was highly involved. Andy Biggs was probably the most involved. So we became close. But Vicente Gonzalez was a Democrat from South Texas, is by the most involved. By he was the only one who came to Mexico with me. So that was bipartisan, and the new task force will also be bipartisan because nobody likes cartels.
So can I ask this family issue? So online, your stuff pops up. Text delegations always popping up on mine. So I see you and Susie at the White House with the president. I see you and Susie. I don't know if she's with you at Mar-a-Lago, the president's birthday. Were you at the defense? Were you at the military parade?
Yeah, the parade
the other day as well.
The parade was yeah.
How does she like working with the president?
She she's I have a great video of her dancing around. Is it the Red Room? It was one of those rooms in the White House. She loves it. She loves being in the White House. We're going to eventually get the picture of him holding her, but you got to push a lot of people out of the way to make that happen, and generally frowned upon inside those areas. Yeah, exactly. No, she's loving it. It's bringing 2-year-old back and forth to DC, almost 2-year-old back and forth to DC is tons of fun. Again, it's just on the bipartisan. So the psychedelic therapies for veterans, that was very bipartisan. We do direct primary care work, that's very bipartisan. That actually goes through Ways and Means as well. The Senate just took that out, which is really annoying. We're going to work on that. There's a million things. And so I don't want people to think like it just never happens and that the polarization is, it's on the big issues and it's a lot of fanfare. You see these like massive arguments happen and then the people see each other in the hallway and they're like, hey, okay, are you going to sign on that other bill? Oh yeah, that one I'll sign on. The animosity can exist, but it doesn't exist, I think, quite to the way people think it does. Vast majority of bills that are passed under suspension. These aren't earth-shattering pieces of legislation, but they're overwhelmingly bipartisan. That's why they're passed on suspension, meaning there's no need for debate. That's what that means. And so it's just not. I don't think it's as bad as people think. And also it's okay. It's okay to have divisions on big issues. That's sort of the point of politics. It's fighting over big issues without war. Like that's effectively politics. Anything to add to that?
Nope.
I don't know. I think they're being told we're out of time. At least online, we're probably out of time. And well, I think you're out of time too. I think that's really do you have to go?
I'm good.
You're good. Okay.
Congressman.
It's all good. I mean, I don't know how they exactly we use it, but there's at least maybe one more question.
You're getting the hook back there in a big way. My gosh.
I know, but they always do it
just throw
early,
some
so like
together.
I can never tell if it's real or not, or if it matters.
My gosh, man.
I don't know. When people start getting up and leaving, that's usually a cue.
It's like you're in the Senate here,
Yeah.
Congressman. I mean, just dragging,
Drag it on. Well, we have substantive things to say. That's why, that's why they haven't left. When they start leaving, then we should probably stop. No, we're one more question. So this is from Beth. It's an important one. Let's see. I'm trying to get to the. Oh, sorry. That's the answer. I'm like, wait a second. That doesn't make any sense. Here's the question. What's being done about the recent surge of anti-Semite violence in our country and the promotion of hatred against Jews and lies about Israel by many in the media? What's being done? So, do you want to take that one? I'll take it. I mean, right now it's a culture war. It's a social media war. It's a media war. That's what's of course being done. I mean, as far as we've passed, I don't even know how many resolutions in the House these since we've been in the majority, countering. They're really statements from Congress about anti-Semitism. There's no new laws to pass because these things that they do are already illegal. Obviously, what you have seen is, and anti-Semitism is definitely a part of the reasoning behind this. What you've seen the administration do is really go after some of these very elite universities where this stuff is most prevalent. And we also did it in the reconciliation bill. We put in one of the pay-fors was an endowment tax. So Rice University was not happy about that. They were talking to me about it, and I was like, well, you didn't let me into your school, so I remember that, but also. Denied. But also, they actually used to be my constituents. They're not, but even then, it's like you guys can afford it. You got a big endowment. You're not truly being hurt by this. We'd rather have that as a pay for so that people can keep more money at home. So that's one thing. And again, like the administration and our thinking behind that was these universities are going the wrong direction. I think they need to get some kind of message there. Other than that, no, like I think what you've seen in the last week, and you've seen the interview between Tucker Carlson and Senator Cruz. You've seen the fight between President Trump and Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson will never waste an opportunity to defend America's enemies. Never. It's his goal. And I don't know who's paying him or why he's doing it. I have some information on that. But when we get it, we'll get it out to everyone. But his motives are questionable, to say the least. And that fight is playing out before your eyes. I mean, it feels a little strange, doesn't it? That the country that chants "Death to America," I mean, that's their slogan, "Death to America." They also don't like Israel, but it's really America. The great Satan is America. That's the great Satan. It's not Israel. Israel's the speed bump to get to America. So I think a lot of people get confused about what's really happening here. They say, well, we're the first line of defense for Israel. Why are we the first line of defense for Israel? It's because the Jews bought us off. No, that's not actually true. Israel is our first line of defense. It's always been that way. And so it's always been in our interest to stop them from being exterminated, because the next step to a massive power to gaining massive power from the Ayatollah is to create an ICBM with a nuclear warhead on it that eventually kills the great Satan. And anybody who believes otherwise has a very naive idea of what Iran's intentions are, and have been for decades. They're very open about it. It's not like they're trying to hide it, y'all. So I think we should be backing the president as he determines what the necessary course of action is. The necessary course of action might be nothing. The Israelis are taking care of most of it, but there's obviously what you've heard. There are 2 facilities that are the major facilities when it comes to weapons grade uranium enrichment. that the Israelis just can't get to, not with their weaponry. They'd have to do a ground operation to actually get to them. That carries with it all sorts of problems. One, it's, Israelis on Iranian territory. Like, what kind of effect does that have with the Iranian people? Because right now our goal is to get the Iranian people to just overthrow and make their own government. That would be lovely. The Iranian people do it themselves. That is everybody's goal. That's Israelis' goal. That's our goal. We don't want to. If we do it for them, it becomes problematic, as we've probably learned in the past. I mean, you got to enable it. There's a difference between enabling it and forcing it. And right now, it's in enabling mode. Israel's being very specific about targeting military targets, avoiding civilian casualties, but these nuclear facilities are there, and they're not going to stop until they finish the job. And so that's why the president is taking the right and bold and hard stance of just saying, look, all options are on the table, and I have a red line. That's leadership. That is very, very clear leadership. And I'm pretty disgusted by some of his critics calling him out on this. They'll say things like, "Well, we're going to get into World War III." I'm like, I'm sorry, but what world is coming into this war? Let's just be accurate with our terminology. By definition, a world war requires the world, and there is zero chance of any other country that somebody will make up something about Russia getting involved. They are not getting involved. They are busy. And by the way, that war also hasn't created World War III. Every single morning I wake up and I say, Tucker is wrong again for the 1000th time. So there's still no World War III.
So Congressman, I know we got to wrap up, but do you feel like this is a moment of time perhaps for the president? Iran doesn't want a nuke just for Israel. They want a nuke for us, in the long term. Is this perhaps that moment in time where you look back in 30 or 50 years and the action that's taken took a very dangerous entity off the nuclear map,
right,
and removed the threat? Does it feel like that to you?
Oh, it is. Yeah, it's very. And I said this before. Very few presidents have had to deal with this. Bush had to deal with this post 9/11. Before that, Truman, FDR. This is a major point in time, and especially when many in his own base are bashing him for it. And so I have just immense amount of respect for the president at the moment as he's trying to navigate this incredibly difficult situation. And I think whatever choice he makes, whether it's to use the giant bomb to destroy the facility or whether they decide that's unnecessary, I got to say this: like, it will not end up in World War III, and there is no reason to believe that it ends up with our boots on the ground. It's just not operationally necessary. And so the people saying that, this is what's so disgusting. This is why I say it disgusts me, because when somebody like Tucker says that, he's trying to scare you. He's trying to feed off ignorance, and he's trying to scare you into being against your own self-interest. That's treason, because he is working for the other side, and that is so wrong. It is not in your interest for the Iranians to have a bomb. It just isn't, and especially when they want to use it on us. And so I don't understand where it's coming from, but I gotta say it is that moment for the president. The president's doing a great job navigating that difficult political environment by being very clear with his leadership. These are my red lines. We might do this. We might not. That's exactly what you should be saying right now.
Great. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. Letting me be part of it.
Kevin. Thank you.
No, appreciate it.
We hit a lot of subjects, and thank you all for staying, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
Thank you.